Hey, bright lights. Welcome to my channel, The Alignment Keys. My name is Tina. If you are new to my channel, please understand these videos are not meant to put the famous on a pedestal or to condemn them in any way. This is an opportunity to look at them as spiritual beings having a human experience. And it gives me the opportunity to showcase one of the keys that I use to help people remember who they are and why they came here, the soul contract. If you would like to know more about the history of the soul contract and how I put the charts together, please watch my short introductory video that I will put a link to in the description box below. I connect with those that cross over energetically to bring their messages through, and so can you. We are all given talents that make this a possibility. To connect with people who have crossed over, our loved ones are always ready to connect, and they want to send you signs to tell you that they are still supporting you from the other side. You just have to be open to receiving the messages. So, how's everybody doing out there? We seem to be in some crazy times right now with all of the upheaval going on in the political world. At least it is in the US. And I do know of some issues also, well, in other countries. And we are also dealing with a lot of natural phenomenon right now with a lot of fires and flooding. So let's begin by first sending out some heart-centered love and compassion to anyone that is struggling at this time. Because when there's so much upheaval happening in the world, it can make all of us feel very unsettled, angry, and confused. It brings up a lot of fear in the collective. And it is especially important for us bright lights to maintain our center, to ground our light, and to help transmute out the noise. Being very careful to not over-identify with the negative feelings coming at you, because those may not be your feelings. They may be coming from the collective, and you keeping yourself grounded so that you can transmute that energy. So when I'm saying anchor your light, that's what I'm talking about right now. We are in a transformative time. This is an exciting time. We all chose to be here for a lot of change, a lot of drama. We've seen that, haven't we? Wow, it's amazing what has happened in the last, since I had my awakening in 2012, it's been incredible. But let's get to it, shall we? In today's video, it's time to get into some good trouble. As we celebrate Labor Day, which is today I'm making this video, it is appropriate that I'm going to bring through several politicians. Hold on to your hats, people. I'm going to mix it up here. I'm going to bring in a couple of Johns. That's their name, both of them. One represented the Democratic Party during his life here, and one represented the Republican Party. Both carried a great level of integrity, even though they were on very different sides of the political party spectrum, and they both had different belief systems. I'm really excited to be able to bring them through, show you their charts, and then we'll briefly, talk about their soul contracts and their accomplishments and what they did were reflected in the numbers. And then we want to get some direct messages from them too, because they have a lot that they want to share. And I've got a few oracle cards, like I always do here, sitting beside me that I might be drawn to, because when I bring them through, I start off in my notes, I do some creative writing. So I do have some famous quotes they pointed to that they want me to share with you. And then they'll have other messages as we get more into the soul contract. So here I'm going to share my screen. Let's bring up these guys here. Okay, we got the two Johns, right? You can see their Star of David, as I always provide you guys with to showcase that, because it shows what the actual soul contract looks like from the I channel the energy of Metatron. This is a diagram of the Star of David, which is part of the Metatron's cube, which is our sacred geometry and how we emanate our reality out to others. We have a spiritual side and a physical side. And I got two pictures that I picked that showcase their energy. And like I said, both guys exhibited great levels of integrity. Neither of these gentlemen were perfect, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. This isn't about measuring them against each other. So I want to make that very clear when I say we don't condemn or judge. We're all here learning, we're all here growing, and we all pick numbers that we want to experience. And so that's how we're generating our reality. And then, of course, we have our families and our ancestral DNA crap to deal with. So it's a little more complicated than just this layout in itself. But I did put them side to side. And so you can see we do have some commonality going on here. Well, they were both politicians, right? And they both were service people as well. But I do want to showcase out that John Lewis, again, was to become more of a self-master in spirituality and in consciousness than John McCain was. He was more about learning how to connect with people emotionally, how to reach out to others. And so we want, again, to get back to this integrity, right? Because we're seeing a lot of, you could say, not very integrity type behavior coming from a lot of politicians. And of course, the media flares this up. It's all they report on. So we have to be very conscious of what we're absorbing, that we're not getting sucked into a lot of the conspiracy theories and brainwashing. And I'm talking about either side. If you're spending time watching something that is just constantly throwing hatred at one party and the other party throwing hatred. Again, this is what is causing a lot of division and separation. And the media loves that because it sells media, right? It keeps you watching, it keeps the advertisers there. So, what is the definition of integrity, right? The actual definition is integrity is a quality of being truthful, following a moral code, whatever that may be, because we have to keep in mind all moral codes might not be in the best interest of everyone. So we want to say following a moral code and the state of being whole and undivided, right? Not dividing. So those are a couple of clues that they wanted to bring up. Levels of integrity are built into every soul contract, but it depends on how conscious you are, what you're pulling in from your charts, because the charts do have negative and positive aspects to them. So if you're bringing in a lot of the positive aspects, those are more higher consciousness energy. You're bringing in the lower level, that's more tied to our egos and serving of self. The ego, wants to make sure that we're taken care of. And that's not necessarily all a bad thing, but we want to make sure that we're still taking the whole into consideration. So it's about being centered in self, not self-centered. And so these two gentlemen that came through, and as I see them coming through, they're joking and laughing with one another. They completely understand their roles here and what they accomplished, what they learned from it. They really understand how they served each other as well. And they just want the best for everyone and both parties. It's not about, again, pitting one against the other. They want the best for everyone. And so what John McCain is saying is sometimes that means you may lose, or what you consider lose, you may not get everything you want. That's the better way he's saying. So it's all about compromise. It's all about taking these baby steps forward. And John Lewis is saying the same thing. Patience is key. He was all about patience and timing and picking that right time to speak out, and when it was a good time to take action, and when it was maybe a time to step back and let the chips fall, those types of things. And that's all discernment and things that we come here to learn about. So We talked about the negative side of things coming through, which it can be attached to one's ego. It's that searching for superficial pleasure. And because the ego is attached to suffering, and it's a very self-destructive part of us, and it's important for us to become aware of it if we are going to expand in consciousness. You can't eliminate it, but it's about integrating. We all have a dark side and a light side, and it's really important for us to be aware of that no one's perfect. Even people like Mr. Lewis and Mr. McCain had great integrity, but they definitely had faults. We're going to talk about a little bit of both. I want to start off with John Lewis here. So he was born February 21st in 1940 in Troy, Alabama, in the Deep South. He was known for saying, "Get in good trouble, necessary trouble." So I really liked that saying. It really hit home with me because when we talk about a moral code, which is part of integrity, we have to be very careful about who defined that moral code and who is that serving. So part of true integrity, because it's all about truth, right? It's not about serving just one group of people. It's about serving the whole. And that's what I talked about. It's about that state of being whole and undivided. And getting into necessary trouble is again, bridging that gap in the moral code that maybe says we need to up level a little bit. There's something that is not working that, again, is creating separateness and disadvantaging people. And that's not something we want to do. Is we want to build communities. We don't want to build communities and then build walls around them. Now, with that being said, I already got Mr. McCain coming in. Boundaries are very important at this time. We're not ready to go to a system of no boundaries. We would have too much chaos. Change is about really opening up to a global world, takes time. We have to raise levels of consciousness, and it's about being paternal and protective, which is his energy, where John Lewis is of the non-violent, very much standing in your power, strength activist. So just a lovely energies from both of them. I have great goosebumps right now. So let's talk about Mr. Lewis. And I'll jump back and forth as they hit on me for maybe what I'm saying that I might need to articulate a little more so that I'm not confusing anyone. So I appreciate their help. Mr. Lewis served in the U.S. House of Representatives for Georgia's Congressional 5th District. Pay close attention to this 5 in his birth chart. It's very important. And again, he was serving the 5th District. He, of course, is known as being a civil rights activist. He is responsible for helping to coordinate many nonviolent protests, including the 1963 March on Washington, which took place August 28th. 250,000 people, he's got a 2 and a 5 here in his chart, marched for civil rights, jobs, and freedom. And it was really about the whole, because when you have one set of people that are being segregated and oppressed, it does affect the whole. We are all connected. So we do that by including everyone to create a much stronger and better whole. John Lewis is based off of his soul contract, came here to do that. And I do want to mention he received more than 50, which is that 5 again, honorary academic degrees, along with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, for all of his work in moving forward our needle on that moral compass a little bit higher, just a little bit. Takes so much time, so painful. Mr. Lewis, thank you for your service. So Mr. Lewis had this 18-9 in his karma or challenges. We come in with it, we choose it, and it's our biggest opportunities for growth. This was about him learning how to make tough decisions and to finish projects. And I bet when he was a kid, he would probably want to procrastinate. And I really got a feeling from him that he initially started out that way. He had a really great teacher who worked with him on this aspect, and it really inspired him to overcome this, being able to get centered in self and be that strong person and be able to make very tough decisions for oneself. And so here's an example of one that was a challenge for him that would again be building this integrity and this confidence in himself. And one was that he was denied for attending college at the University of Alabama. He spoke with Martin Luther King, who was a great mentor of his, about whether or not he should sue them for denying his admissions because he felt he was being denied based on the color of his skin rather than on his capabilities. He decided to not pursue, to speak out with his truth at this time, because it's learning about how to make these tough decisions. And he was pulling in some fives that have this, on the negative side of the five, they have this fear of persecution. And so he chose not to pursue the lawsuit because of the fear of safety of his family. And so maybe that's him taking everything into consideration, making a tough decision, even though he really wanted to sue them because there was a definite injustice going on. Now, this also is part of this 9 energy, which is a most powerful number you can have in your chart, but because he has it in challenges, it can be learning a lot of lessons of disempowerment. And this was the segregation he was seeing as a child, being denied access to educational materials, being denied a library card. And it's so hard for a lot of us to even imagine that going on in the US at any time. But why we would not want people to be educated is mind-boggling. And then that goes back to other fear and control issues and lack mentality of others. So he has this great talents and for something he shares with Mr. McCain here. And this gave Lewis this great ability to trust in something greater than himself, knowing that everything will work out okay. This is about radiation of spirit, self-expression, his individuality, being your own person. And so this also helped him to overcome this very disempowering aspect of this 18-9 here that he had, and then being able to push it forward and come at it from a higher perspective, because this number here is a fulcrum, which pulls from his challenges and karma and gets him to complete what's driving him. We call it drives, or I call it goals. And so this is about him pushing the envelope here, because his fives are all about truth and freedom. We'll get to that in a minute, but he was referred to by many as the conscience of Congress. I love that. That's really a great depiction of his chart too. He's got a lot of spiritual energy. This would be something that he knew that we needed to lead with a conscience. That means being very conscious of what our behavior is doing and how it is affecting others. He was one of the first to talk about impeaching a president, George W. Bush, because he had violated the law in authorizing the National Security Agency to conduct wiretaps without a warrant. He stated at that time that he's not a king, he's president. Lewis wanted to come through to say that this is why the country is where it is at, why we are where we are. We cannot allow anyone to be above our law, our moral code, what we have established as ourselves. And this includes our Supreme Court as well. I think there are issues there that need to be addressed. He's saying if we don't address these, because again, they hadn't been addressed during his time. Nixon was another case. There were others in the past. And because we didn't address those, it will continue to see an erosion in integrity in the country as a whole, because it allows this permeating vibration of that it's okay to create separateness. It's okay that I can do something because I'm in this position, even though no one else can. This is a level of narcissism that we're struggling with right now because we're doing actions based on a few or one's ego rather than on the whole. And so he wants to also say this is where he fell short because he says he made the mistake. Here's somebody who's about nonviolence. And he said he made the mistake in giving the president more power after the September 11th attack. We passed bills where the president had more authority and we could retaliate quicker and do all of this stuff. And that is not true justice. That is revenge, and that is not as a mature country where we want to be. It doesn't mean that there isn't some type of action, but it means you step back, you wait for all the facts to come in before you make any changes. And there's no need to give presidents power to act unreasonably and to make decisions based off of these knee-jerk reactions rather than facts, what's best for everybody, involving diplomacy and coming up to an agreement with everyone. So everything that has happened is to show us where our weaknesses are at, he wants to say. This is the country's opportunity for growth. This is our karma. He also wanted to mention that forgiveness and justice is key here. We've made the mistake in the past, he wants to say, where we forgave presidents or we pardon them, or however you want to say it, we pardon these people. But that's a mistake when you're doing that, because forgiveness is very important, but we cannot forget the justice piece, because not doing it creates an imbalance. So it's important for every soul's growth to have both. And justice takes time. Like I said, it can't be rushed. If it's rushed, it's just, and he wanted to state this very clearly, if it's rushed, it's just revenge in disguise. We were just sinking down to our egos and trying to get some satisfaction from it. And so he had this great 5-5 in goals, which is all about Mr. Lewis using his voice to speak the truth, to express himself, regardless of how others would perceive it, because he did get over that fear of persecution for speaking your truth. And that hit him up again, that disempowerment of the 9, that time when he didn't vote the way in his heart should have voted. So he wanted to bring that up because not everyone's perfect. This is somebody of high integrity. This is not shaming him in any way, but he wants you to understand that this is how you learn about integrity is sometimes you don't make the right choice. And then how you learn from it is you reflect on it. And so this number, again, as I said, is also tied to freedom. And so he was a member of the 13 freedom riders. This number is very spiritual, as I told you. It's a very etheric. It's about learning about intangible concepts and birthing new things. And it's also about writing and speaking. So this gave him a great ability to be a great orator and to also write. He became an ordained minister as well. And I thought it was funny. I wanted to tell you that it was actually at age 5 when he decided that he wanted to be a preacher. His first congregation were the chickens on their family farm. I thought that was very cute. So for him, in his spiritual challenges, he had a 21-3, which is learning how to take on large scale challenges, which he did. It's also about overcoming a lot of hardship in his childhood, which was true. He was the 3rd child out of 10. You can see that reflected in his chart as well. Very poor sharecropper family. So he would have to overcome this deep racism that was projected onto him and poverty consciousness, because again, his family did not have a lot. And so that can develop a person with a lot of lack mentality and a worthiness issues about whether or not they are worth having abundance, generating abundance. And so it was something he had to work on. And so John would also be challenged to not come into his power by using violence, because violence is tied to this 9 as well, and it's tied to the 3's Mars energy, because it's about learning patience again. And trusting that God will be there in the flow and that things will work out for the highest good of all. So trusting in that is really important because the ego wants to use force, and threes can be very violent. They can get tied up in their ego and they want to use violence because it seems to be quicker to get results. But again, like I said, it isn't based upon truth. Real power was shown by Mr. Gandhi in getting the British colonialists to leave by doing a nonviolent non-cooperation. And so you have to be willing to give your life up for it and not be violent in return. And this is a little bit different than what Mr. McCain's role was here. He also has a 3 in his energy, which is about using violence. So again, it's based upon how your chart is set up too and the lessons that you're meant to learn. And so these freedom riders were riding interstate buses to help bring awareness to the racist policies. And he was just 21 when he started this, and he was one of the first freedom riders who was beaten and arrested by angry mobs. He was quoted as saying about the freedom riders, "We were determined not to let any act of violence keep us from our goal. We knew our lives would be threatened, but we had to make up our minds and not to turn back." And so the 5, this comes from his 5s, choose the dominant 5s. It gives you a lot of courage, a lot of willpower to step into your truth. So he was responsible for arranging a lot of nonviolent marches. Unfortunately, some of those turned violent. One of them was the Selma to Montgomery March in 1965, referred to as Bloody Sunday. I think there was over 600 marchers there, and the state troopers ordered them to disperse, even though it's their right to march. And when they stopped to pray, they were shot with tear gas and were beaten with nightsticks. Lewis himself suffered a fractured skull, and he bore the scars on his head for the rest of his life. And he said it was absolutely worth it. I may not have felt that at the time, but now throughout my life, I would not have changed any of that for the world. I think people needed to know just how pushed down people were getting. And there are pivotal moments like that where it was starting to become aware that this change needed to happen. And so he has 5 5s and his spiritual talents. Again, this very spiritual energy, like I said, which again would help him, give him this great courage and energy to offset some of the heavier energy of the 21. It's a divine mother energy. It's about strength and durability and creativity. It's a beautiful energy, but it also has, again, this very heaviness to it. And the 5s being very etheric can help him to lift that energy. The 21 3s is about endurance, being able to endure these types of things, and it has that hardship component. The best one who really exhibited the 21 3 was Leonard Nimoy that I had done, and talked to Spock too as well. It was very interesting. If you're interested in that divine mother energy, you definitely want to check out that video that I did quite a while back, but it is an interesting life that he had. So the numbers gave him the courage. He also did some fun stuff too. You don't have to be all so serious, So he, like I said, it involves writing, and he did at the age of 73, which adds up to 10. He was the first member of Congress to write a black and white comics trilogy, an autobiographical depiction of the civil rights movement through his perspective. He was influenced by the 1958 Martin Luther King and the Montgomery Story comic book. So Martin Luther King was a great person, a leader for him. This trilogy was a major success for Mr. Lewis as well. So when we get to his drives here, this 11-2 was all about him building this body of work, living this legacy of a philosophy on how to live, how to use these nonviolent means to create positive change. And it was at the age of 11 when Lewis went to New York with his uncle that was when he had his first realization of just how racist his home of Troy, Alabama was. And this was helping him to build and bring through those higher levels of truth of the five and to share that truth with others. So this number also brings with it a life to death component. And it's about learning how to value life. So you lose people that were close to you, or you could have near life death experiences, as we already know from some of these violent episodes that he was exposed to. He also lost many friends, like Martin Luther King on his path. That was very devastating. But in death, there's always a transmutation. When we lose somebody that we consider of great importance, there's a great transmutation that happens because, of course, we never die. The soul doesn't die. And so the soul doesn't end. And so they can do a lot of work from the other side, even if they have crossed over. And a lot of times it can be reflected in a lot of awakening. When my nose itches, I know they're here trying to give me messages. Okay, I'm listening. Wait. So he said, yes. So when people cross over, it inspires the ones they left behind to do more work, to reach their new potential. So as tragic as it can seem at the time, it's not a setback as we would view it. It's actually a progression forward in some aspects, and that's Mr. Lewis coming through. So overall, Mr. John Lewis, what did he come here overall to accomplish? It was really to come into conscious self-mastery, using his gifts and talents to be of service to the whole and to God. He did a pretty dang good job of that, I think. And so I want to read to you one of his quotes. Hope I can get through it without crying, because a few times I've read it, I've cried. So hopefully I'm over that right now. So, okay, I'm going to read you this quote that is from him. You are a light. You are the light. Never let anyone, any person, or any force dampen, dim, or diminish your light. Release the need to hate, to harbor division, and the enticement of revenge. Release all bitterness. Hold only love, only peace in your heart, knowing that the battle of good to overcome evil is already won. I almost made it through. It's so beautifully said. It touches me so deeply, because this is what we mean by coming into self-mastery, consciousness, and using your gifts in service to the world. So thank you, Mr. Lewis. And we want to jump over to Mr. McCain, who had a different experience. He had different goals, some say similar numbers. And so that's going to become obvious as we start talking through it. So let's give a little backstory on Mr. McCain, born August 29th, 1936 in Panama, died on August 25th, 2018. He was a son and grandson to 4-star Navy admirals. So he was third generation. Sounds like some serious DNA patterning going on. Hey, John. He's like, yeah, we're still working on that one. I think his son too is in the Navy. So this is tied to the power versus force aspect. He was the recipient of the Silver Star, Legion of Merit, the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Bronze Medal, and the Purple Heart. And those are not given out lightly. This man earned lots of respect and did many, many great things as well. He was a captain in the Navy and served in the Vietnam War. He then served in the United States Senate, where Mr. Lewis was a congressman. Mr. McCain is a senator, and he served from 1987 until 2018. He was a U.S. Navy officer and was a Republican nominee for president, I believe, several times, the last one losing to Barack Obama, right? I think. Sorry, I should know that living in the US, but I don't. I apologize. John had a reputation for being a maverick. That's his willingness to follow his heart rather than stay within his old party beliefs. His physical challenges are this 11-2. Now, we saw this in Mr. Lewis's chart, but it's a little bit more karmic here for McCain because this is coming into this world with a lack of structure. And so you're not necessarily, even if you are an older soul, maybe going to come here with a lot of knowledge. You have it, but you're not able to access it as well when you have an 11-2 in your challenges or in your karma because you came here to build new structures and you don't want to be biased by the old, whether good or bad. So this was him having to find his own structure. And this is also what I talk again about DNA patterning is when you come in here with a lack of structure, you will become codependent on whether that be your father, what his dad did, his granddad did. Okay. So you have a little bit of this codependency coming on. So you're following these old beliefs and these old patterns instead of doing something new. But he did, in some respects, he did, where his grandfather served till retirement, he did other things. So there is this little bit of breaking out of some of that mold, which is what he did come here to do. And again, it's also about learning to value life and having those near life death experiences or people close to that die. Now he was taken as a prisoner of war on a mission that he went North Vietnam. This was on October 26th. 10 can be a very karmic number. So, and it was the 26, which add up to the 8 here from 1967, and then flying his 23rd, which we said that 5 is so important, bombing mission. After he was captured, he was tortured on a regular basis. He lost 50 pounds. He was put in solitary confinement for 2 years. This is about gaining great wisdom, looking at things from different perspectives, suffering with the low of the lows as he contemplated suicide, because this is about finding balance within your emotional range. You see that I point out this spring, so you can have these high highs and he can have the lows of the low lows, right? He did have a breaking point. He did sign a confession, which he fought and fought and fought that, and he carried a lot of guilt from that. He said he really had a hard time forgiving himself. He made many, many trips over to Vietnam afterwards and was responsible for reestablishing some diplomacy, but he still carried a lot of that anger and hatred. That's a lot to process, and nobody is going to judge him for that. I certainly hope nobody judges him for that. I felt everything he did was a very high honor because he was Admiral's son. They were going to release him early as this ploy that they were going to do. And he refused. John McCain refused because they did have a code. And the code was if you get captured, the prisoners who are captured before you need to be released first before you're released. And so he refused to be released until, those those prisoners were released. And that is, again, showing an extremely high level of integrity that not a lot of people would have been able to show. He completely sacrificed himself, endured great pain, and just such sacrifice to make sure that he went home. And when he did, it was with 108 other prisoners. He also has 4 in his talents. And the 4s, again, we talked about great self-expression and individuality. It was here where he could really be that maverick, going against the status quo when he did vote in favor. When he was in the Senate, he voted in favor of the Civil Rights Restoration Act of 1987. These are the same talents that John had. And it makes people really come into their own individuality and self-expression, as I said, and it really makes them feel okay with that. What we have to watch out for, though, and Mr. McCain wants to mention, you have to watch out for that excessive pride and arrogance. And he's struggled with that a little bit because he was raised, we are these Navy admiral. I'm this identity. I have this kind of this hierarchy, because when you're in the military, it's all hierarchy based. And so you have to be very careful about this excessive pride and arrogance, which is an entitlement that comes from the ego rather than saying that everybody's on the same playing field. So he said that can push people away and causes some isolation. That comes from the fours and the dominant eight, which actually is about him building community and creating community with people. So he's got a little bit of this conflict energy. And I really see that about him, this great conflict energy where he would do this really great thing. And then he would do this really not so great thing. And I was like, this doesn't make sense. But it does when you look at his chart, because he's a walking contradiction in some respects, because a lot of people would thought, oh, he's just conservative Republican. And then he would all of a sudden voted for LGBTQ rights. And people are like, wait a minute here. They could not pin him down because he was this individual and he was this maverick. He also said one of his mistakes was not originally approving for the Martin Luther King Day as a federal holiday. And he did admit later that that was wrong. That's one thing I liked about him, is he knew his shortcomings and he would talk about them. And so he said, and that's somebody who has capacity to grow, and that's a person of integrity. Nobody carries 100% integrity because we're always fighting these little battles of beliefs that we've taken on from others and our collective consciousness and what we've been programmed with. He apologized and he did eventually support it for his state, which was Arizona. And so again, like John Lewis, we've got these fives in goals, and his physical goals, drives, which is about speaking, being a really good speaker and writing. And this gives him a lot of that high level of courage and a little bit of recklessness, because I'm going to talk about this. So early in his flying career, he was actually seen as a pilot who was very careless and reckless, because in a lot of his training missions, he crashed. The recklessness comes from the fives for sure. They make great like astronauts, especially if they have fours and stuff too, because they can push through their identity and create great things. It all serves this great purpose. But when you have an 11-2 in your challenges, and if you have that, your judgment can really be clouded. And I talk about this with the crocodile guy, Steve Irwin, right? He had, I believe, a karmic or a challenged 11-2. And this can create this blocked judgment. And so then it's called the foolishness to wisdom. And John would do some really foolish things. But when people do really foolish things, it's really about learning from those mistakes and getting new perspectives. Like I keep saying, it's all about learning. It's not meant to make you feel bad about yourself. It's all about being able to forgive yourself and move forward. So his fours were about trusting that he was going to be able to get through Vietnam. He just had this inner knowing that he was going to get through that. And the fives gave him this great courage and also gave him this ability to write. And fives are, when they're in goals like this, they are the teacher of the teachers. So these are great leaders who can teach others about goals and those types of things. One of his most popular books was Faith of My Fathers, part of that ancestral patterning he was working on in this lifetime. And then another was titled Why Courage Matters, and that is directly linked to that 5 number here. Now he's got a 4 in his spiritual karma. And so when you have the same number, you tend to get a lot of the negative and positive from that number, especially when you have one in challenges and one in talents. So he's getting this little bit of this conflicting energy going on. And so this really would make him struggle with spirituality. trusting who God is, what is this all about? So he would struggle a little bit. That's why maybe he didn't become an ordained minister like Mr. Lewis became, because Mr. Lewis was able to sort a little bit better with the way his chart was as to that spiritual side of us. And John McCain has a in life purpose. That wasn't really his overall goal. And then we get into this control. He's very much a control freak. John McCain was. Sorry, John. He goes, oh, no, just tell it like it is. Speak your truth. Speak the truth, he says. He's so very direct person. They want to take matters into their own hands. This is where I talk about this, where you have to be careful about knee-jerk reactions and that you're doing things for revenge instead of true justice and true power. And you want to force it because you're impatient. Fives can be very impatient. So we talk about the impulsivity of the fives, the impatience and impulsivity of the threes, along with his emotional instability of the twos. John could be very, very reactive and a feisty guy. I imagine he instilled a lot of fear in people because he would be very quick, very, very quick. Something he had to learn how to moderate. And that was part of this too, moderating this 11-2 and coming into more emotional resiliency. So one of his best qualities was, again, he didn't shy away from his shortcomings. He apologized when he needed to, and he made it very public. When you have a 4 in challenges like this, and 4 is tied to sacred geometry, mathematics, he struggled with mathematics. And the 11-2 means that you don't have a lot of structure to begin with, logical structure. He had to find his own way. He said it wasn't one of his strongest fields. So picking these numbers for John was really about him to be able to think outside of the box. This helps him to see maybe what others couldn't from a different perspective. And so that's really why people come in with these charts that kind of blind them. The 12-3, though, is a beautiful number, although it can be very positive and very negative. And we see this in his chart, right? He was, again, this prisoner thing, this warring, this hawkishness. This can be very negative, very judgmental. Yet he could open his heart and show great love and warmth and community. He was just all over the place. But it gave him this ability to kind of teeter-totter, because he was meant to come into balance here. He had these great talents to try to balance this out. This is how he would sometimes he would cave against the conservative culture, and then he would bring forward some campaign finance reform, which is totally what the conservatives did not want him to do, because he was a little bit humiliated because he got pulled into some drama where he had also taken gifts and money from people who were setting up regulations for the banking industry. And so this was causing a lot of conflicts of interest. And he had enough, again, integrity to be able to look at that, which is what we're struggling with Thomas Clarence on the Supreme Court, not to pick him out individually, because there's other things going on there as well. But again, this taking gifts and then presiding over cases, well, that's not integrity. This is a huge issue. And this is what will degrade our society if we do not take action on this. This is when it's the time to take action and speak out against this kind of stuff. And so he was a little bit, I think, embarrassed because he did consider himself such a high integral person. He did eventually give the money back and apologized, and he was instrumental in putting through some campaign finance reform, which looks like we might need some more of. The 3 makes him very, again, that straightforward and impatience, as I talked about. And the violence comes from this, as I also talked about Mr. Lewis's chart. He started combat duty at the age of 30. Big surprise, right? This is Mars energy. It's red and fiery. It's something that John came here to learn about, trusting in the flow, that things will come, not so much forcing them through. And that was something that was very difficult for him. And that's set up by his chart. He did some really good things at critical times, and we have to honor those things that he did as service to our country as well. Those need to be honored. No one's all good or bad. We don't want to demonize everybody and throw them in the garbage because of one or two things. We want to look at people as a whole and their contributions. So he does want to talk about war. I knew this was coming. Okay, so this was something that he pointed me to, that he said about war, and it was on a paper that he wrote about foreign affairs. And so he wanted me to repeat this this sentence about war. He says, "Nothing, not the valor with which it is fought, nor the nobility of the cause it serves, can glorify war. War is wretched beyond description, and only a fool or a fraud could sentimentalize its cruel reality." So this is somebody who learned a lot about what war does, what it means to go to war, what happens to people when they've been through war, the after effects, all of that. Is it worth it? Is there more that could have been done on a diplomacy level? Was this just the US raging its ego, saying, I want you to bow down to me? You know, you have to come back and look at these things. So now we get to his spiritual drives, which is the 8-8. He was a dominant 8-8. So we're going to talk about that paternal protective energy. So 8s are it's very masculine, but it was about John learning how to tap into that energy and connect it to society at an emotional level. So we're going to read another paper that he wrote on enduring peace built on freedom. So this is now, again, this comes from the 12-3, and the 5s, the 12-3s are all about love, and bringing the love in. And we're talking about enduring peace, and 5s were about freedom. And he says, now it is this generation's turn to restore and replenish the world's faith in our nation and our principles. President Harry Truman once said of America, God has created us and brought us to our present position of power and strength for some great purpose. In his time, that great purpose was to erect the structures of peace and prosperity that provided safe passage through the Cold War. In the face of new dangers and opportunities, our next president or leaders will need to have a mandate to build an enduring global peace on the foundations of freedom, security, opportunity, prosperity, and hope. Overall, John was here to learn how to make appropriate choices with the power he was given in society, and to share his knowledge with others, which he did by writing his books about courage and freedom and his biographies about what he went through to show people the effects of war. Those types of things will also have a lasting effect on peace, just like Mr. Lewis's nonviolent approach method and showing how you stand up for yourself and you speak your truth. Both these guys did so good. Appreciate it. Appreciate them so much for being here. We do want to pull a few cards. I'm being pulled to the Wisdom of the Oracle deck, and I am going to stop sharing my screen here so you can see me pull the cards. All right, here I am. Okay, so this is so perfect, isn't it? We have the 2 owls with crowns on their heads. 2 great wise owls with that says loyal heart. What is your heart loyal to? This is the 3 and the 5s, which they both had in their charts. This also adds up to the 8, which was in John McCain's chart. But how perfect was them, how they are on opposite ends, but they're still looking at each other. And he's saying how that loyalty doesn't mean just doing for your party, it's doing for all. And also looking at the other person, knowing that they carry their own wisdom and their own guidance, that it may not resonate with you, but it's definitely part of our journey here. So look this up quick. Let's see what they have to say. So hang in there, guys. This isn't forever. Like I had said before, we chose to come here. This is a really exciting time. So don't get down by it. Don't think all the negative stuff you're hearing, that good things aren't happening. There is collaboration going on between people. There is good things happening every day. And so the essential meaning of loyal heart is fidelity, loyalty, devotion. Evidence of loyalty will appear in your life. Others will prove they are faithful to you, and you will in turn commit fully to them. There is a sure and abiding certainty in your heart. Know that spirit is always loyal to you. No matter the outer circumstances in your life, trust and have faith. That four, trust, trust, trust. For you are eternally loved, always divinely protected. You are never alone and divinely directed. Listen for the signs, people. Listen for the signs. Well, thank you, guys. That's really cool. That is so awesome that came through. Let's see what we got here. Yes, and this was the other lessons too that we want to learn. There has to be a self-acceptance as well. Again, the more people that do their inner work and accept themselves for who they are, rather than looking for that acceptance on the outer edges from others, is super, super important for us standing in our truth, because we have to be able to accept us. And this is an angel too, by the way. She's very beautiful. So this is from the angel guide, and we are going to see self-acceptance. You are making incredible efforts to heal and release habits and thoughts that once held you back. Take a moment to look at yourself through the loving eyes of Mother, Father, God, and appreciate how far you've come. Gratitude, gratitude, gratitude. All the adversity you faced and the person you are today, angels are wrapping their wings around you and encouraging you to see what they see. And they see you as perfect just the way you are. If your confidence has dropped recently, or you've not been as positive as you'd like to have been, change that now by giving yourself credit where it is due. Maybe you've discovered that negative talk and thoughts aren't working for you. This is the time to try loving yourself. To get started, try speaking to yourself more respectfully and giving yourself some leeway and some time to change. And as Matt Kahn always says, you deserve more love, not less. And we're going to go to the wisdom of the hidden realms. We want to get some dark, deep stuff. Oh, and this just pops out. I couldn't even shake it. It's the 2 and the 4. They both had a 2 and a 4 in their chart. And so this is the map maker of destiny right here, ladies and gentlemen. Authentic purpose, inspiration, free will. Are you writing that map of destiny out? He's got his little feather pen, which signifies the angels, which are in the background. Oh, I see a bird. Almost looks like a plane to me. Kind of reminds me of that John McCain, the plane, and then the fairies giving direction, and the compass, which way are you going? We're creating this with our free will as we go. Trust me, your soul contract is your soul contract. I mean, it is what it is. It's how you choose to walk through that soul contract. That's where your free will comes in. You can bounce off the walls all you want. You're going to experience those vibrations that you set up. This is a really excellent one. This is, again, the archetype cards. And so the slave comes up. And the light attribute of the slave, because there's a light and a dark side to everything, is surrendering your power of choice to the divine with complete trust. The shadow side of being a slave, is giving your willpower to an external authority out of fear of making your own choices. Being very careful about, there's collaboration with others and mentors and teachers that have a lot to offer through their knowledge, but you have to be the one. Remember, John, he needed to learn how to make those tough decisions and then be accountable for that and not let others steer that ship, that map maker of destiny. You need to be steering that ship as well. It's okay to listen to people, it's okay to have mentors, but it still comes back on you. So what do we want here? I think our last one before we pull a mantra card will be the sacred destiny. You guys are hitting it, man. You're hitting it. Diligence comes up. I love, you can see the bird, and then you can see getting that higher perspective, right? John McCain flying those bombing missions, seeing the clouds here. Remember that too, about clouding, watching out for those clouds of judgment, but still taking flight, making sure that you're still flying and knowing that things will work out. So that's a beautiful card as well. And doing your due diligence. And that means checking your facts, patience, doing the work, doing the baby steps. Let's do this. And we're going to do one healing mantra because we did talk a lot about racism and war and a lot of separateness going on. It's really about a clearing, cleansing period. So this, again, I look at it as being a really good thing. And this is a perfect mantra for us to end this beautiful video with these two wonderful leaders of great integrity from the Matt Kahn deck. And this is about encountering conflict. I don't choose sides, I take a stand. That is the mantra. I don't choose sides, I take a stand. I don't choose sides, I take a stand. Let me find. When conflict is encountered, two opposing viewpoints wrestle for a dominant position. Each hopes to achieve success by changing the other's viewpoint. If encountering conflict from a conscious standpoint, you may realize one of the greatest gifts you can offer is allowing others to be heard. You may not agree with their argument, but you are embracing their needs simply by choosing to listen. When you listen instead of lash out, you are taking a stand for love. This is making the decision to anchor higher frequencies of light, anchor your light, through the demonstration of your ethics, morals, and values, instead of matching the unconsciousness of others with equal amounts of aggression. Can't fight hate with hate. You can only fight hate with love, and love doesn't always win, but it will eventually win. The universe always wins. So this mantra is ideal for settling arguments, unraveling passive aggressive behavior, and releasing the tendency to blame. I don't choose sides, I take a stand. I don't choose sides, I take a stand. I don't choose sides, I take a stand. That was awesome. Thank you guys for being here. And for all of you who have subscribed, please like the video, comment. I always love to hear from you. Any new ideas on who you would like to bring through or get messages from. I'm always here to support you. I've got some other ones coming up that people have requested, so I am working on those. So please take care. Please anchor your light. We need you. Don't ever forget how important you are. I love you guys. Take care.